Okay, it says we're now live streaming on Facebook. I'm Graham from Tri Coaching Partnership. This is a good old friend of mine, John Farlam. I'll let him tell his story, and it's going to be a long one. So, John, just tell us about yourself and your life journey, mate.
Where do we start? Well, good evening from Ireland, which is where I live these days. And in fact, I've lived here for the last, how long, Graham? I was living here when I was doing trial coaching with you, wasn't I?
Yep.
I must have been here 20 years, I think. So where do I start? Throw a question at me, Graham. You know I'm always lost for words.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So, well, how did you become an ADI then, John?
How did I become an ADI? I don't know if he's still alive. Somewhere, the last time I saw him at a driving school in Crystal Palace. And that was probably 30 years ago or 25 years ago. But there's a guy somewhere out there called Victor Blake. If anybody knows Vic, just give him a shout for me. Probably retired now. But Victor was a manager of a BSM office in Putney. And I can remember what I was wearing that day. I was wearing a green sweater that had holes in the sleeves, so I had to push the sleeves up. And I had holes in my shoes. I'd been in the music business before, but I was kind of falling on hard times and things. And so I'm walking past this BSM shop. There's a big sign in the window, driving instructors wanted. And like everybody else, I thought, well, I could do that.
Yeah.
Everybody sit in the car and get paid for it. What could be easier than that? So I went in and bless him, to this day, Vic, and ahed. And he looked at me, and I talked a fairly good talk even then. And he said, well, okay, go to Monday morning, go up to Chelsea for a driving test. And the rest kind of history from there. And those were in the days where BSM, any PDIs watching this would love this. BSM not only trained you for free in those days, but they put you up in, it was called a hotel. I mean, I was sharing a room with somebody I'd never met before. It was more of a kind of hostel with a bar. But they put you up in this place in West Kent somewhere in West London, whilst they trained you in the day, you know. It was a long day, 8 o'clock in the morning till 8:30 in the evening, the training days were. So they fed you as well. So it was great.
And it had a bar, John.
And it had a bar, except things were different in those days. There are stories of tri-coaching. They're all untrue, but there are stories of tri-coaching where the Graham and Sue and I and various hangers-on will go out in the evening and start with a bottle of wine each and then carry on from there. And none of those stories are true. They're just rumours. Yeah. But what was true back in the hotel, in the bar, everybody was down in the bar except me in the evening. And I was up in the room reading the driving manual, as you might expect.
Oh, bless you.
Yeah, I was the nerd of the week. I was a nerd, but I was the one that, of course, they always turn to say, shit, what's the answer to that? Or how do you do this?
So how did you go from, becoming a driving instructor? What was the transition to being, the sort of the industry guru you are now? How did that happen?
I was named the industry guru by a guy who used to manage the DIA magazine when I used to write for DIA. How did it happen? I'll tell you how it didn't happen. First of all, a little bit more about the BSM story. The way it didn't happen, which might have been a shortcut, or I might have gone a totally different route, you never know, but with Peter Russell, who died sadly with COVID earlier this year. Dr. Peter Russell, I should say, was head of training at BSM at the time. So I first met him on my very first day of instructor training. It was the first time I met Peter. And at the end of the week's training, Peter said to me, he said, come back in 6 months and talk to me about joining the training team. And so I could have got there a heck of a lot sooner. So I maybe it was in my blood. Maybe Peter saw something in me way back then. And subsequently over the years, I had a lot to do with Peter and worked with Peter on various projects and things. But that's how I didn't do it. How did I do it? Well, I was a driving instructor in London. I had a driving, I worked for BSM. I worked for I think Monk School of Motoring. I don't know if they still exist in West Kent. I have a feeling they probably do. Colin Monk was another figure in the industry, but I guess Colin's died. I've not been in touch with Colin for more years than I can remember. Someone out there will know. I worked for an Irish fella in Streatham, Highway School of Motoring. Before I ever knew I was going to have links with Ireland and live here, my boss was this Irish guy, and he was a guy I bought 3 second-hand cars off when I set up my first driving school. I had some guys working for me there. But it was a little while. I then moved to Sussex and set up another driving school. But it was a little while before I got into instructor training. And that's when I was in Sussex. I'd done some work with John Miller, Driving Instructor's Handbook, John Miller. Yep. I knew John well. And I used to borrow his skid pan. He rented the skid pan at Goodwood. Okay. And I used to borrow the skid pan in the evening. Then I had 1 or 2 driving instructors started coming down wanting to go on the skid pan. And then from that, they started wanting a bit of help with their driving instruction. And I used to just do it for free and for a bit of fun and stuff like that. But it grew from there until I eventually got recruited headhunted, if you like, by learner driving centres.
Okay. Oh, what, LDC? Yes.
LDC. It was called Foremost Training then, the original company, and that went bust. And then another company went bust, and then it eventually became LDC. LDC was a kind of seeding ground for a lot of stuff. It was based on some videos that had been made by a guy called Alan Fleet way back in the 1980s, and Alan Fleet was way ahead of his time. I never met him. Clever guy though. And he went bust doing the videos, just ran out of money because it was too big a project. Yeah. And the videos turned up in a bank vault, and to cut a long story short, Paul McCardle, who's still the family that run LDC now, Paul's brother-in-law, who's set up another big driving school training company, one of the biggest in the UK. His brother-in-law found these tapes in a bank vault where he used to work as a clerk.
Okay.
One thing led to another, and that was the birth of LDC. It's a longer story, but I was headhunted by LDC because I'd been using their videos and stuff, and I was kind of one of their prime promotional ADIs, one of their success story ADIs, and they got me in to run their training team, which was great because I knew. Am I allowed to say bugger all?
You can say bugger all, John, because neither of us swear.
No, we don't. We don't.
No.
I
could tell a story about when you swore at the ADI and GAC conference, but I won't.
I could tell that story. that was as a result of a bet when somebody said I couldn't use an F word in the presentation. Yeah. You thought I was going to swear then, didn't you?
Yeah. Back to the LDC.
Yeah. Did that.
Yeah.
LDC, Graham. Yeah. The thing is, my experience of instructor training at that point had been teaching my then wife, who she qualified with a really good score, a 5.6 on the old system or something like that. And given it was the first person I'd ever taught all the way through from scratch, I'm quite pleased with that. And I'd helped some of the people, but I was suddenly taking on a training team of something that I don't know, I think there might have been 40 or 50 instructor trainers. Many of them have been ADIs longer than I've been an ADI. And they'd all been doing training longer than I'm training. And all of a sudden, I'm going to start teaching Granny to suck eggs. You know, I'm teaching all these guys. But the reason that the guys at LDC, no, got to be careful what I say. The reason that they took me under their wing, if you want, was because they could say I've got some different ideas. You see. And I had this, you asked me how I got started. I thought, well, what am I going to do now? I've been commissioned in writing this new ADI training program. I know what I'll do. I'll get the BSM program. I'll get whoever else who was around. BSM was the only big player then. This was way before AA. AA driving school started with LDC, by the way.
Okay.
LDC wanted to take over the AA's holiday business because AA used to have shops in the high street, and they had a holiday business at counters in the motoring shops. Yeah, and the holiday business went bust. LDC wanted to go in and take over the counters in the AA shop, but the AA thought, no, we can do this. We can run a driving school. So they bought a load of materials from LDC, rebranded them AA, under license, and that's how AA driving schools.
Okay.
But that's another story. I seem to have had my fingers in so many pies over the years. Try coaching was another one.
Yep.
Maybe we'll get to that.
Yep.
Where were we?
Maybe we'll do a two-part.
We've only got to LDC. Sorry.
I said maybe we'll do a two-part interview. Part one and a follow-up.
It's not midnight yet, is it? No, I thought I'd get all the good bits from the other driving school programs. I'm not exactly going to rip them off or steal them, but I will modify them, improve them, put them all together, make something good of them. 6 months, I'll have a program. There was a flaw. You can perhaps guess what it was. There were no good bits. Nobody had any good bits. And now that's, what a big-headed sod I am, thinking that. But my issue was the way training worked didn't work. It was around about 28% pass rate at that time. But more than that, if you really drill down into it, it was nearer, if you take everybody that started to everybody that finished, it was more like a 9% pass rate, or 9% qualification rate. Now, difficult exam or not, I don't know. I've never thought it was difficult. But I get a lot of stick for it, but I put that down to the training.
No.
I don't put it down to the exam. I mean, you take any other exams, GCEs, all of that shit, all of that stuff. You're probably looking at a 60% pass rate, and 60% of people going through something like that. It just didn't fit the figures. Didn't fit.
No, absolutely. I mean, me and you have had many conversations along the same lines, and it's partly why we, our ethos or our thinking is aligned, because neither me or you believed in the training that we were given or was being produced. We knew it didn't work.
There were a lot of good, I'm not saying people were getting ripped off, at least not deliberately. There were a lot of really good, really dedicated individuals and people out there. But it all grew out of that original BSM training. And in fact, there was one, I won't besmirch his name, he's not alive to defend himself anymore, but there was one trainer in particular at BSM who put his stamp on the whole way the thing was run. He was a larger than life character, and he wasn't a bully as such, but he liked his own way, and he was a bit outspoken. And to give you an idea of one of his methods, if he was doing part 3 training, our little baby hair has just run past my window there. Sorry.
Easily distracted.
As always.
Yeah.
One of his methods were things like, if a student would say, let the clutch out, he's in the driving seat, the student's teaching, let the clutch out, he'd stop the car, open the door, reach under the seat, grab a clutch plate, mechanical clutch plate that he had under the seat, and throw it out the door.
Yeah.
And somehow that was funny. Now, I can see that's funny, but try being in the instructor's seat, being in that other seat, struggling like how to get the words out, feeling emotional, halfway through the week, feeling like you're never going to make it, and you're on the verge of either slashing your wrists or packing it up, and he pulls a stunt like that. And there was loads of that kind of stuff, wasn't there? Loads of, and of course, I'm not saying all instructor trainers did things like that, but they took on the ethos of that style of training.
Yeah, it was very test focused as well, John.
It was totally test focused, and I would call it belittling for the student. Yeah. Now, the problem was, if you've been through that training and then you go to BSM or whoever it was who was going to take you on as a trainer, you go out with one of their trainers who's been through that training. That's how you understand training. Yep. And everybody tells you, the DSA want this, and the DSA, as it was, want that, want the other. You start teaching you start taking the marking sheets and pretending that they're a syllabus.
Yep.
Yeah, and people are still trying to do that to a degree today with the new style test.
Yeah.
You might remember, Graham, I was quite vociferous against the new style test, not against the new style tests. It was a misconception. I support the new style test. I don't support the way the DVSA brought it in and the way they don't have any control over the trainee license system.
Yeah.
And at the time, maybe 40% of people were taking up the trainee license. Now more than 8% are taking it up.
Well, you can hardly do it without taking up a
No,
trainee license.
I mean, it is possible to pass. We've had people pass without a trainee license, but it's not the norm.
No, and it's difficult because of insurance, car, you know, getting a client, doing it for free, time, lack of, you know, it's really a challenge for PDIs.
And there is confusion over the rules. The DVSA states something very clearly on their website about marketing and stuff, which is not true. It's actually not in. They make it a rule and they say this is a rule. No. There's no legal requirement and they can't enforce it.
Let me bring you back a little bit. So you're at LDC. We've now left LDC. You've grown a reputation.
Yeah, I left LDC under a bit of a cloud, but whilst I was at LDC, I've been writing for magazines and things. Originally something called the ADI magazine, the PDI magazine. I then spent many years alongside Peter writing for Driving Instructor DIA magazine, and that helped me start to build a profile of my own and become known. And in those days, you see, I've had luck. It's blessed us all along the way, both good luck and bad luck. But some of the good luck I had was that in those days you could put leaflets in driving test centres. Now, because I'd had a fairly high profile, the chief examiners or the senior examiners of all the driving test centres, probably in England, but I didn't work all over England, in the north of England where I worked, Yorkshire, Lancashire, 100-mile radius of where I was in West Yorkshire, they all knew who I was. So when I asked them to put my black and white leaflets for the check test doctor into the waiting rooms, they did. And I started getting loads of check test business. Now, one thing I didn't mention about LDC, because of the way things went, I'd actually had the equivalent, what must be the equivalent of a university education, although it was self-education, because I had 4 or 5 years simply to learn how to do the job better and to learn how to, and I was getting paid, and I was getting paid a good rate for doing that. So it was a sort of education that absolute luck, So I was then able to take that off into my check test doctor and part 3 doctor and then part 3 training. And I did up to moving to Ireland, I was just running what was the original SmartDriving, which is now ADI MasterClass. You can, where is it?
Yeah.
Behind me, which was a member service, I started producing stuff like visual aids and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean the VTS was really. I think I met you through a friend called Tony Biest, who'd been out to see you, but I'd seen your VTS, your visual teaching system. And I could see the sense in it because I liked it because it wasn't cluttered. It was no visual overload. And I thought, this makes real sense to me. I can draw on this. I like this.
One of the problems with visual aids, you see, I figure if it ain't broke, let's see how we can make it better. Or if it ain't broke, let's stretch it till it breaks and see why it breaks. Yeah. And one of the things I've seen all these visual aids, and there were different sorts of visual aids. There was stuff, the LDC sort of changed my original concept, which was lucky because I could take the original concept back and make it my own again. But they started putting loads of notes and different stuff on there. It's too much information.
Yeah.
And they're missing, and not only LDC, I mean, they got that idea from other people. And the problem with that is you're tending to forget that it's not a handout. It's not something that people are going to read and learn for themselves. It's a teaching aid. So it's to augment what you're doing as a teacher. And if you've got a note on it, for example, that said, turning right, and then there's a little note up there that says, and remember to look over your shoulder because there might be a motorcyclist coming. There's a little picture of a motorcyclist as well, and some more stuff cluttering it. I no longer have the ability to use that as a teaching aid and say, so look at this point, what would we be particularly careful of there? What are the particular dangers there? Now that's now become, something like that is becoming a teaching aid because it's the material working in conjunction with the teacher, the two things together.
And I think that was, for me, I mean, I think it was probably about the time I was doing my advanced certificate of adult education. And I think, you know, I could completely see the sense in it because I was educating myself in how to become a teacher. And, you know, it's something that a lot of ADIs haven't actually done, is educated themselves in how to become a teacher.
Oh, I mean, we haven't talked about education along the way, but I did all the things like the city and guilds stuff and, you know, adult teacher training courses and communication skills, business and all those things. That was my evening class stuff, or weekend stuff, you know. And now the other sort of visual aid was funny. It had loads of notes on one side and loads of pictures on the other, and it was designed for part 3. So what the student could do was sit there and read all the notes while the examiner sat there looking around, paying no attention.
Yeah. Well, I've never heard this before anyway. Yeah.
So I designed something that fitted both camps. It actually worked as a prompt for the student or for the ADI to make sure, because even now if I went out doing a driving lesson tomorrow, I would scribble some notes out. I would have something to work from. I wouldn't work from memory because I want to make sure I can give 100% of my attention to teaching and to the customer without having to remember what it is I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah. You know, I can quickly check that off a checklist.
I'm exactly the same. I still work with guidance notes, checklists. And, you know, people might, well, what? Because I want to make sure I cover something. I cover everything I want to be covered. It's your syllabus, but I need to make sure that it's in there because I'm not going
to. And any instructor watching this who's been doing it for more than 12 months will remember a lesson where they go home and they thought, oh, I didn't mention, you know, whatever. Yeah. And we've all done it. And you can even do it when you've got a list. So.
Yes, no, absolutely. You know, I've done it when I've got a list, without a doubt. So you were doing, so now we got MasterClass and you had people like me coming over to see you in
Ireland.
The islands.
In those days, it was still SmartDriving, but the equivalent of MasterClass. Yeah,
I staying in some abbey where there was a madman with an axe who wanted to kill you. Don't speak to. I think his name was John as well, but you had to be careful where you spoke to him. Big fella, yeah. Be careful. And she was lovely, the landlady.
The low lady. That was his mother, so she cared for him. You know.
It was a bit like something out of Psycho.
That was the one. Well, I like to think I provided not just a training course, an experience. Yeah. And that was all, I mean, some of the places we used to go and train, you know, we made the best of the Irish countryside and all of that stuff. I've not done any of those courses for a while, but I had well over 100 people, instructors flew over from England to do those courses with me, which was great. But I think most people will remember the experience.
And they were good fun. And then, I mean, if I go back to sort of our relationship, we were sort of semi in contact, jot a few emails backwards and forwards. And then, you know, the Hermes project was on. I was running a company called the Big Red Fleet Company. Yeah. And we met up at the University of East London with Dr. Jonathan Passmore.
And Sue was there.
Susan McCormick, yes. Yeah.
It was interesting that before I missed another bit out in the 90s. In the 90s is when I did all that, because I brought a lot of new stuff into driver training, and a lot of it came back then it's come from other sources since, but back then it came from NLP. Anybody that's heard of NLP? And I did I don't know how many hours every weekend for about 3 years, and I ended up doing a 5-week intensive trainer's certificate. So in the 90s, I could have made a fortune out of teaching NLP in business.
Definitely.
But I couldn't work with all those stuffed shirts. Pardon me for any ex-business people who are now driving instructors, but that's probably for the same reason.
Yeah.
I would have fish out of water with all that corporate stuff. Jonathan Passmore was running this coaching course, the first coaching course ever for driving instructors at the University of East London, and it was in danger of not happening. And so I think I managed to find 8 of the 14 or 15 people.
Yeah.
Somebody got in touch with me and said, look, this course looks really good, but it's in danger of not happening. So I managed to recruit an extra 8 people. I think, well, what did we pay for that? Was it 1,200 quid a time?
I can't remember, but I mean, there were some great people on there, weren't there? There was you, Graham Lucas, Big Kenny Lawrence.
Big Kenny, yeah. There were quite a lot of... was Mark Bourne on that as well?
I don't think Mark was on our one.
Because Mark had been to me for trainer training, and Lynn Barry, I think Lynn Barry was on it, a whole bunch of people were on that. The sort of people that have cropped up all over the place. That was a good week. That was a good course. Interesting though, one of the things that was taught on that course, and that I don't know if I should talk about this now. I've started a thread of conversation, and I might be dropping the BTEC in the mire.
Hey, you might not know.
There's a lot of evidence now out there that talks about learning styles, and one of the big thing on the coaching course was learning styles. There's a lot of evidence out there that hasn't debunked the concept of people learning in different ways. People have, in fact, I just wrote something this last week for my members, part of my communication skills stuff, about VAK, visual auditory kinesthetic, which is wrongly interpreted as a learning styles thing. It's just a preference that people have for gathering and handling information.
Absolutely. I mean, what I'd say, John, is we put that in context on the course.
That's important, because learning styles don't mean people learn better. It just, in fact, it's been shown that sometimes people learn better when you take them out of the comfort zone. But it's worth, I've always felt it's worth knowing about learning styles to understand that people are all different. Not everybody thinks like I think or like you think. And sometimes you've got to do a bit of translation for them. So that was one thing. But that course was a great course. And that's what made its way around to try coaching, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the catalyst. Yeah. And that and sitting in the back of your car in a field somewhere on the moors, talking to sheep. But
well, we all, that was in Buxton. Because I used to do my UK training in Buxton, and we all, you and Sue and I conversed. I think, did we have 2 or 3 days in Buxton and swapped ideas and came up with that and went away from it thinking, yeah, we can do this. We can work together on this. And then Sue put in a lot of hard work. Yeah.
Well, we had to have someone clever between us, didn't we? I mean, we just blustered a bit, and Sue went, I could write a course. Oh, you could, couldn't you? Yeah.
It was around about the same time, though. It was a different one for me, that, because Graham Lucas had shortly before that, you mentioned Graham Lucas in terms of the coaching course in London. And people who, I would imagine most of the people watching this will have seen videos with me and Graham on Facebook or wherever else. Brad tends to put them out and share them. And Graham was a businessman. He'd retired at 51, thought he'd play golf a lot. He'd made his money, he was set up. He was a very successful businessman. Got fed up of playing golf, decided to be a driving instructor.
Why?
And more on quite genuinely, not so much for the money, but because he thought he'd like to do something where he was helping people, which is fair enough, I suppose. But then he went on in the first 18 months within the first 2 years of qualifying, he put 18 cars on the road, which goes a long way. I run a Facebook group that David Poole used to run,
Yeah.
And David Poole used to get a lot of flack and a lot of trouble, poor David, because of the way he communicated stuff sometimes. But Graham's example just showed that if you know about business and you know about driving instruction, there are very few barriers to success.
Absolutely.
You know? If you know about business and you don't know about driving instruction, you might have problems. And if you know about driving instruction, you don't know about business, you might have problems. But you need to know a little bit about both. And the people that know a little bit about both are the ones that are earning 30, 40 quid an hour.
People do well out of our industry, you know.
50 quid an hour is the top rate I know at the moment for daytime lessons, unless somebody knows anymore.
I think that's probably about right as far as I know. You know, I know that our trainers are generally in that 35, 40 pound an hour mark, which is pretty damn good. But saying that, they're on 50 pound an hour doing other stuff.
Yeah. Something that really shocked me last week or the week before. I always thought 20 quid was the cheapest regular lesson. And I know some that are charging 20 quid an hour. I know one guy that's charging 20 quid an hour, and less than 5 minutes down the road, there's somebody charging 40 quid an hour. What's that about? But 15 quid an hour.
15?
I heard about guys charging 15 quid an hour. And it was a reliable source. It's not just a hearsay thing or something I've read on Facebook. It was a reliable source. And I followed it up. And 15 quid an hour.
So I know you talked about NLP. I know we just talked about Dr. Jonathan Passmore. But there's somebody else I want to talk to you about, because
absolutely,
yeah.
And I used to be on the phone to him. I'm guessing we're going to talk about the same person. But I spent many hours on the phone to him. He used to get up early. He used to get up about 5 o'clock, 5:30, and I would ring him about 6 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes he'd ring me at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and we'd spend an hour just talking. And I learned such a lot from that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we're talking about the same person, so you can mention his name.
Well, it's sadly, again, he's another one that's no longer with us, and it was an honorary, it was an inherited knighthood, but he had a knighthood, indeed. And it's Sir John. Yeah, no. And for those who don't yet know who we're talking about, that's Sir John Whitmore, who, interestingly enough, got a lot of flack from a lot of areas of the driving instruction industry, you know, who on the basis that you've never been a driving instructor, what do you know? Yeah. Well, let me tell you, John Whitmore knew more about driving instruction and driver training than the risk of upsetting 75% of the people out there, more than 75% of the driving instructors I've ever met, and equivalent to the rest at least.
Yeah. No, I mean, you know, and about learning, teaching, education. He
went to Harvard with Carl Rogers. Client-centered training has been to the fore in the last, 5 years, something like that. We were doing it before that. I mean, we were talking about it from 2008 and pushing it. And I'd been talking about it a bit before then. You had before then. I'm sure Sue had before then. But mainstream, it's been coming. It's only really since the new standards check marking came in that client-centered training has really started. It's a bandwagon that everybody's sort of jumped on as if it's a new thing that they've just discovered, you know, in magazines and things like that. But it's been around, but it started before this, but it was made popular and really made popular by a guy called Carl Rogers in counselling, in therapy, in person-centered therapy in the late 40s. John Whitmore went to Harvard with Carl Rogers. And I remember he showed me a handwritten letter that Carl Rogers had written to him about discussing some of these ideas, and from the 50s, discussing some of it was one of his little treasures, you know. And he wouldn't let me take it off to my room to read it, or wouldn't let me make a photocopy of it or anything, but he allowed me to look at it and read it, and it had come out of his treasure box. And I felt really honoured that he'd done that, you know.
Well, he was also friends with Timothy Galway as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, the company, the performance coaching, which is still a top global coaching training company now, that originated with John's work with Timothy Galway. and they drew, all their stuff was around the client-centered, the person-centered, and then looking at different styles and different levels of that. So many different branches of coaching emerged from people who'd been through that school. So they went to John, they learned from John, and then they went off in their own direction, coactive coaching, different models of coaching. I mean, I was just going to turn around to my bookshelf, which is hiding behind a green screen, which is, so can I just share a little bit of magic?
Yeah, go on in. Yeah.
I have a bookshelf.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
And back there, I've got several books on sort of all sorts of coaching and different things and different models.
Autism coaching and behavioural based coaching and
cognitive behavioural coaching, all sorts of stuff. It just goes on and on. And I've kind of dabbled with a lot of it, but am I an expert in any of it? Am I an expert in anything? I made a good cup of tea earlier.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, you offered me one. Thanks very much. Okay, so that's taken us sort of closer to present day, because we grew Tri Coaching Partnership together, and then we parted amicably as we could because you had interests elsewhere.
Unfortunately, I mean, just for the public good of that, I mean, I had to make a decision, and it was really based about some bad luck in my life. I had a mistimed house purchase in Ireland. We decided to downsize after my father-in-law died because he lived with us, and we decided to move to a smaller place where we live now. And I took out a mortgage so I could secure it and get it instantly before we'd sold our own place. And in the meantime, the Irish crash came and property prices went down 75%. So the property I bought was worth 75% less than I paid for it, and the property that I was selling was worth 75% less than I was going to sell it for. And in the meantime, I'd taken over £200,000 mortgage out. And so I had to make a decision to go where I could earn the most money, and that was SmartDriving.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, John, if we just fast forward a little bit to where you are today, John Farlam's ADI Masterclass badge in the background. If you wanted to do a sales pitch for that, what would you say?
Why am I doing it? Am I doing it for the money? I'm getting near to, I'm 66, I'll be 67 this year, and I'm getting near to kind of, I don't think I'll ever retire, Graham, but I'm getting near to wanting to do things on different terms. And SmartDriving was my baby. I founded SmartDriving, I built SmartDriving. I couldn't have built it to what it is today without the other guys coming on board and having shareholding in it. And I'm a shareholder in SmartDriving now, but I don't own it anymore. Mm-hmm. But I'm pulling away and doing less work with SmartDriving. And I'm wanting to get nearer back, the time that you came over to see me in Ireland. And I don't think I'm going to go back to doing in-car stuff now. I might do some 2022. I might do some last hurrah MasterClass in-car courses. But I don't know yet. But I want to get back to the lifestyle and earning enough. I was earning enough. It'll boost what bit of pension I've got that I had back then. Probably working 4 days a week, maybe a bit more. But I want to put, even if I'm working 5 days a week, I want to do it on my terms, on the things that I really want to do and that interest me the most. Selfish, if you like. No. But luckily, the stuff that I really want to do and the stuff that really interests me the most, by some strange reason, is of interest to quite a lot of people out there. Yeah. Which I'm happy to say. And again, it's another one of my luck things. I said earlier, you get good luck and bad luck. And there's one thing about luck, whether it's good or bad, you create it mostly. Yeah. And just some of the stuff I've talked about today, I don't normally talk about it, but all the bloody time I've spent studying and learning loads more stuff. I've been a nerd, the hours. If you want to call it CPD, I've probably done 8 hours a week for the last 30 years. Yep. And I'm sure you've done much the same yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading 8 books during lockdown. You know, and I remember Sheila saying, "How can you read 8 books?" I said, "It's like watching the TV. I watch one program, finish that.
Yeah.
It's a series. I watch the other one. You know, it's like watching, you know, and I watch EastEnders, and you just watch the news. I read one book, read a chapter, read another book."
And it's really interesting when you do that, ideas spark off each other.
Yeah.
You'll read something in one book, you read Alice in Wonderland or whatever you're going to read totally separately, and it will trigger something. And all of a sudden, that's a new idea. And then when that happens, I write 1,200 words about it.
Well, I've been writing as well. Are you still listening to books in your sleep?
Yeah, I'm still doing, when I sleep, I sometimes sleep, yeah.
Yeah.
So you asked me to give how would I promote MasterClass? I whatever you want. I'm on a goal at the moment. I'm on a bit of a, David Poole's dropped out of the industry, and I've picked up some of David's stuff so that people can still have access to it and I can still put it out there. But apart from that, I'm using David's stuff. I've said about ideas bouncing off of each other. I've realised that a lot of David's stuff I've written about over the years anyway, and I've covered over the years anyway. He's put a slightly different twist on it. But I've also had the ADI background as well. And so I'm bringing... I'm riding the 2 horses, the ADI background and the marketing stuff, and my own business stuff, because I've been successful. I suppose I'm not something I would call myself, but I suppose I'm a successful businessman. Well, you know,
it just happens that way.
It just, it's not what I set out to be, but it's just what it is. But you create that by doing all that stuff. But my goal really is now, for me, you reach an age, Graham, you won't have reached it yet, mate. But you reach an age where you start confronting your life. You start looking at your life. And my dad died at 79. I'll be 79 in just under 13 years.
Wow.
You know, and when you start looking at life like that, I want to share as much as I can of what I've got. And Peter Russell did this. It was only a handful of people towards the end, but he kept working. He did a lot of work in the NHS, so for the NHS, ironically, you know, COVID taking him in the end. Yeah. But I want to share as much as I can with as many people as I can that want to hear. There are thousands of people who are interested and think, who the hell's that? So-and-so. But there's a group of people that do want to. And I want to share with them as much as I can while I'm still able to do it.
Nice one. Nice one. John, I've got to ask you, this is the tough question, actually. It is the standing question throughout every interview I've done. It is a tough one, and we won't spend too long about it. But how do you think I rate as an interviewer?
You sent me some questions, Graham. Can't I answer the one that says, what kind of car do you drive?
No, you can't. No, because I've been in your cars, yeah. I've been driven by you.
I've still got the same car. The 2006 Mitsubishi four-wheel drive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, what do I think of you, Graham? Or what do I think of your contribution to the industry? Just frame the question back again.
We'll just move on. I wanted your position. How do you think I rate as an interviewer? So I'm off now. Right.
How you rate as an interviewer?
Well, you did say you were. Well,
you did interrupt me once or twice.
I want to go and have a drink.
But we haven't got started yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
that was the synopsis, and the preview of what I was going to talk about today.
All right. I've got a couple more questions for you.
Go on.
All right. Where do you see the role of driving instructors in road safety in the future?
Road safety in the future is always an interesting one because the autonomous cars keep bobbing their head up. But I've said all along, I don't think autonomous cars are as close as people think. I mean, if you go back to 2014, 2015, we'd all be in bloody autonomous cars by now. Yeah. Elon Musk had a telling statement the other day. He said, I can almost drive all the way to work now on autopilot. That means it's 90% there. But it's interesting when you look at anybody who talks about development time, the first 90% of development takes the first 90% of the time. The next 90% the next 10% of development takes the next 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And some say that the curve's exponentially more than that. In fact, it's until you reach a point where you can demonstrate automatic or autopilot, it's safer than human drivers. That's the tipping point. I think that's 2040.
Yeah, easy. Yeah. Well, if we take, like, you're an airline pilot, you still talk to be an airline pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Planes fly themselves.
And even at that point, even if it's 2030, it's going to take 10, it'll be an exponential curve again, but it's going to take 10, 15 years for all the vehicle stock and all the thing to change over or to modify old cars. So first of all, driving instructors will be playing a role in road safety for some time to come. What role? That's really down to driving instructors themselves, I think. How big a role will road safety officers play a bigger role? Will road engineering play a bigger role? I don't know. Do I think, again, I'm sorry if I upset some people with this, do I think driving instructors could play a bigger role? Yes, I think they could. I think the starting point would be to teach the DVSA syllabus. And I can hear lots of people shouting at the screen at this point. How dare you bloody judge me? Well, it's just, I'm not judging anybody, it's just my opinion. Okay. Yeah. But if you nail down to the DVSA Learn to Drive syllabus, there's stuff in there. Yeah. I mean, how many instructors teach about pollution, for example? How many instructors teach their people about using a different mode of transport, for example, for certain journeys? And I'm only just scratching the surface, you know. So I think there's a way to go yet. Interesting that during lockdown, road casualties came down. That's a good way to
very noticeable
to sort out road safety. Get rid of cars.
So a final message. Yeah. What message would you give to driving instructors right now, today? Put
your prices up and earn it.
Good.
If that's a one-line answer, if you want me to expand on that.
No, John, no. I've got...
and earn it. It's the important factor.
And definitely.
When I was charging the highest lesson rates in the 80s, and that was around about 15, 16 quid an hour then, to get the same value now, inflation compensating, you'd need to be charging about 44, 45 quid an hour. Driving lessons have gone down in price tremendously. Yeah,
I agree.
Call out a plumber on a Saturday morning.
All right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to say goodbye from Graham at Trike Coaching. John, you can say goodbye, and then
I'd like to say thank you very much for those that have stuck it out this far and are still listening.
Okay, right.
And yes, goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay.